by me.
In this video, we're going to talk about soul music. So just like rock and roll, or just like different eras of hip hop or rap, there are subgenres, right? Like we could say classic rock is one thing, but hair metal is something else, and grunge is something else, but they're all under this umbrella of rock. Well, soul music is the same thing. There are lots of different varieties of soul, and this earliest version of soul is specifically referred to as sweet soul. So whenever you think of golden age, think of sweet soul for soul music. And this is contemporary with Phil Spector, of course, and the girl groups and all that. So this is an African American music style and genre, but it had substantial crossover success, more so than rhythm and blues did. Rhythm and blues was important, and it was successful in some areas of the white community, but really it took Elvis to really bring rhythm and blues combined with country and western mainstream pop to the masses, whereas Sweet Soul is going to do it all on its own without having a white artist performing these songs. And it's really unique in that way. There will be very few African American musical stylings that are this successful without any outside help. It's known for its subtlety, its musical and lyrical sophistication, and unfortunately that it was completely destroyed by the British invasion. It was becoming more and more popular, and right as there was about to be this big breakthrough, these British bands come in and it moves back to rock in a pretty big way. So let's talk about Sweet Soul. A few of the most important figures. I'm going to start with Nat King Cole, known for songs like Looking Back from 1958. And a few years later, my favorite was Love, Love, but spelled with the spaces in between, from 1964. I think Love is one of Nat King Cole's best songs ever. He has an amazing cover of Route 66 as well. But the thing about Love is, unfortunately, he passed away before he ever had a chance to hear this. It was recorded right before he died, and it was released posthumously. We have Johnny Mathis with songs like Chances Are from 1957 and Misty from 1959. Misty is still one of the most important songs for jazz standards. And these are adult romantic songs. They're not aimed at teens. It's much more mature in the type of love that they're singing about and that they're writing about. Really, it's more like Frank Sinatra in terms of lyrical content, but it doesn't have the big band. It has a much smaller ensemble that is in many ways the same as these other genres of this kind of golden ages or dark ages of music, the Brill Building and such. Very similar instrumentation. Another important figure is Sam Cooke. So Sam Cooke is someone who moved from gospel to pop, and if you listen to his music, you can absolutely hear that heavy, heavy gospel influence. Hit songs include You Send Me from 1957, as well as his biggest hit by far, still one of the biggest hits in music history, A Change Is Gonna Come from 1964. Very powerful, very moving song written in the midst of the civil rights movement. And as an African American, living through that experience, if you listen to the lyrics of that song and the arrangement, it's just a very powerful and moving experience. In addition to what's important about that song for its meaning socially and culturally for what was going on, we can also look at that as a great example of Sweet Soul for its musical aesthetic. It has this big string introduction with like violins and a full string orchestra. And you hear that a lot in this kind of music, a lot of heavy strings. And also, you don't hear it in this song as much, but in some of the other ones we'll talk about, you hear a Latin influence. So a certain way of playing percussion, drums, and guitar that sounds like Latin music at the time. Unfortunately, just like Nat King Cole, who died in 1964 and was never able to see the success of many of his hits, such as Love, Sam Cooke is murdered in 1964 in his hotel room. We're not exactly sure what happened, but all reports seem to indicate that it was some kind of dispute with another man over a woman. I'm not going to elaborate further because we really don't know, but it could be something that if you're interested in, you could look up some of the other theories, even though nothing has been proven at this point. So, in addition to those artists, we also see, of course, Leiber and Stoller. So I just mentioned that this was a genre of music that was really focusing on the successes of the African American community without the white influence. And I still think that's true in that there aren't white performers. All the big performers are African American. And yes, Leiber and Stoller were writing some of the music, but they were on this track anyway. It's not that they saw something that they thought could be, financially viable and they wanted to be a part of it. They've always been writing music in the African American tradition since their upbringing. So they are the ones who really discover these early examples of soul from the 50s. and decide to blend in these R&B and, like I said, Latin influences. So you can hear the artists who work with Lieber and Stoller, it's a little bit different because they're taking what was already very successful and they put their personal touch, those, again, Latin influence I was talking about, which you can hear a lot on songs by the Drifters, such as There Goes My Baby from 1959. Lieber and Stoller brought that song to Jerry Wexler, who was the head of Atlantic. I'm going to continue to emphasize this, but Atlantic, indie studio, indie label in New York City, worked with Ray Charles, worked with a ton of important singers and songwriters and composers and musicians. Also where Tom Dowd was with the Octopus. Well, actually Les Paul's was the Octopus, but Tom Dowd got the second 8-track tape recorder. So I just want to keep that fresh in your mind because we're going to be talking about Atlantic a lot throughout the story. So Jerry Wexler of Atlantic actually didn't think that Lieber and Stoller should release this song, There Goes My Baby by the Drifters. They thought it sounded too Latin and too classical, and it sounds like it's stuck between two channels. It's like you've got your R&B station and you're kind of getting these weird influences, and he didn't think that it worked. But Lieber and Stoller, again, they are, by this point, becoming the most important producers and songwriters in the industry, and they are finally at the point they have so much creative and artistic control that they can sort of throw their weight and influence around and say, listen, Jerry Wexler, we love you, but we need to do this. And I appreciate that you don't think it's a good idea, but we're going to do it anyway. And you know what? They didn't want to lose their contract and their professional relationship with Lieber and Stoller, so the people at Atlantic said, okay, but if it's not a success, it's on you. And of course, it was a huge hit. So they got even more power from that. That was definitely a big one. And one of the members of the Drifters, kind of the lead singer, so to speak, was a man by the name of Ben E. King. Sometimes people think it's Benny, like B-N-N-Y when they hear it, but no, it's Ben space, the letter E for his middle name, period, space, King, Ben E. King. And this is representative of growing ambition in pop, that it doesn't need to be disposable music. I talked about in the last video that it's kind of like a Kleenex, right? It's something that you use and you throw it away. But with soul music, people like Benny King and people like Lieber Stoller and Jerry Goffin and Carole King, they're all seeing that this music can be really amazing. This can be artistic. This can be, as I mentioned before, sophisticated. And there's no reason it has to be tossed away. So we're going to start to see that shift a little bit with people like I just mentioned, that it can have lasting value. So what happens is Ben E. King decides to pursue a solo career, and he wants to continue working with Lieber and Stoller. And they honored that. They said, okay, we'd love to work with you, but they're still working with the Drifters. So it's kind of like when you're friends with a couple who are dating and they break up, but you stay friends with both of them, and you can imagine that, you know, depending on the relationship, it could potentially be kind of awkward at times. That's what they were dealing with. Lieber and Stoller go on to write music and produce for Benny King, we get great songs such as Spanish Harlem from 1961, and again, one of the biggest songs from this time period, Stand By Me from 1961. Great song to listen to if you want to hear that quintessential example of this sweet soul era with the strings and with the Latin influence, with this really sweet sounding voice by African-American musicians and singers. Listen to Stand By Me from Benny King. And then the last one that we'll talk about is that we have the Drifters. Without Benny King, what they do is they go on to have other songs like Up on the Roof from 1962, and probably the most popular song with On the Boardwalk from 1963, another great one for the Latin and classical influence. Well, that is it for Sweet Soul. I'll see you in the next video as we talk about movies, TV, and dance crazes.